did that for about a year and a half, and then went to work at a different place. Didn't get back to the lathe until about a year and a half ago. I'm driving to my shop. Been doing flat work for a long time in wood, just hobby. And Bob over here has got his front door open, or garage door open, just turning up away, making dust and stuff, and I couldn't help but stop and talk to him. And we've become relatively good friends, and he got me started in it again. And the first thing I wanted to do was to make something practical for my wife, because, you know, that means I can get more stuff. So I came up with these salad bowls. You've seen them before. This one's about a year and a half old. One of the first ones I made. Still holding together, and that's the key point. And what I want to talk about tonight is the fact that it's still one piece, although it's been used 2 or 3 times a week ever since then. So what I make these on is a glue block. Y'all are all familiar with glue blocks. I just want to talk one thing about how I made the glue block. Was took a simple piece of wood, 1 5/8" Forstner bit, drilled a hole in it, put some tape over the end of the nut, stuffed the nut in there, used the hammer or whatever to put the nut all the way in, then poured epoxy around it, and then put it on the lathe, faced it off, made it round, and that decides the bottom diameter of my piece. So I make the bottom diameter so I don't take any off my glue block. Now, the first ones I made were just plain old nuts. This is the lock nuts. And I learned a hard lesson by this, that the plain old nut doesn't index up against the face of the spindle, which is where we're looking for the threads. You can see here aren't really always going to define plumb, perpendicular, and concentricity. But if you get one of these on here...
Wait. You're not allowed to use $10 words.
Yeah.
Okay, we're limited to $5
All right.
words.
They won't be round. So
Thank
now,
you.
but if you put this lock nut up here, and you take the lock nut, it's got nylon in it, you take your parting tool, stuff it in your 4-jaw chuck, or put it on your spindle back with a couple of washers, you can easily take that nylon out, and you've got a nice piece that's not too expensive to make glue blocks out of. So just because I know y'all are all excited about this, I bought some nuts. If somebody would like to have a nylon lock nut, they're here waiting on you to take when the meeting's over, if you stay away. You stay away. So here's the one I made early this week to demonstrate what we want to do here.
So when you finish with the block, lower it down, you just throw it away.
I do my best.
You don't reuse the nut?
Well, it's hard to get out.
Well, I'm just saying. I was wondering.
But what I've done, I've glued some more wood onto it, and what I'm going to do when I part this off is I'm going to be parting in the maple, not in the mahogany. And I'm going to try to only take a 16th or so off the mahogany. I've got thick pieces of maple for just that reason. Now I want to part this off, and I don't have the substantial skill that I see on YouTube to hold my parting tool out here with one hand and put my hand on the delicate bits and see it not fly across the room. I had a couple that flew across the room, so being a person who enjoys having tools, I just couldn't resist it when I saw one of these things. So I bought this thing to hold on to it so I can part it off without any problems. Okay, now the first 20 bowls of this I made almost entirely with what I would call beginner tools, mostly the carbide scrapers, the Easy Wood tools. I still use the Easy Wood parting tool. I think it's a pretty nice design with that little carbide tip in there. But the rest of them I've now gotten good enough that I can almost use the skew reliably. So I do that whenever I can. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to try to part this off without having it fly across the room. Watch closely. Now what you see here, you'll get to this in a minute, is I have this little bearing, I call it for lack of a better term, this little rod sticking out of the bottom of my bowl that goes into the round hole in the chuck. You may have noticed that a minute ago when I held this up. And that means even if I didn't have this thing, it don't go nowhere because this rod kind of helps it on itself. It's kind of like a little bearing. And you'll see that wasn't really the reason that I have the rod, but it turned out to work pretty good for that. Now I left this deeply dished, just a little bit of glue on it, so you can see that I didn't have but a small part to do, so it won't take much to put it back on here. And I usually dress it up by just taking some 100 grit belt sandpaper. I have one of those big belt sander sideways things that I try to do my aluminum pieces on, and frequently I catch them and the belt comes into little pieces. But the little pieces have this really aggressive grit and it'll flatten this sucker out in just 5 seconds. So that's my story on glue blocks. Again, if you'd like to have one of these fancy lock nuts, you're welcome to.
Question, why do you use lock nuts instead of a plain nut?
Okay, I couldn't see it, but if you put just a plain nut, you'll never register. Ralph, what's the name of this piece right here?
The shoulder on the spindle?
The shoulder on the spindle, and you've got to hit the shoulder on the spindle to guarantee that it will be round.
Perpendicular.
Concentric.
It locks up properly. Okay, it's just like your chuck. Okay, when your chuck,
Regular nut on there, it may wobble some.
right, your chuck
It
has
will
to
wobble.
hit up against the spindle, the shoulder on the spindle. Okay, so the same thing with the
If you
nut.
see the back of this adapter in my chuck here, it's exactly the same way. It registers against the shoulder. It doesn't register against the threads. These threads are not particularly accurate threads. What's that, Class A threads or Class B
I'm not
threads or
sure.
whatever? Now I'm going to take this little magic box off here, and I'm going to stuff this over here. Okay, now what I do now is Mr. Bob gave me this marvelous present for Christmas. I turned this sucker on. I'm going to saw this little peg off. Then I'm going to dish that out in there and put this really fancy looking thing on my tailstock. I like these Forstner bits. And when I've cut that off, dish this out, I'll end up making a mortise about that deep. I just make it the same depth as this little edge of the carbide here, because I can see it pretty plainly. And I then either use a Techna makes a tool to make your little dovetail with, or I found that I took this old skew and resharpened it. I reverse the lathe and do it like that, so that I can use the mortise instead of the tenon. I think it's a little stronger, particularly when you've got a bottom that's this thick. And what you'll notice is that I can put this bowl back on the lathe whenever I want to, hit it with steel wool, and put more finish on it. And this is the finish I've used. And the reason why is I give some of these to some of my relatives. And some of my relatives are liberals. And they believe some of these things about what you should and shouldn't eat. And so if it doesn't say food safe on it, they ain't going to eat it. So I make sure I get the food safe. And it makes a nice finish if you put it on a couple of times with steel wool. And my youngest son, bless his heart, gave me this marvelous little branding iron here that I brand everything just so I can be proud of it. And one of the problems that I've struggled with and gave up just this week is this little bitty hole there in the middle. And that's made by that little bitty thing there. And I found out, unfortunately, if you grind that little thing off, the drill bit don't work anymore. So for a while, a company called Morris Wood Tools, which was sold by Fuller and Company, made one of these where the glues, I guess for lack of a better term, went all the way across and were offset, so it made a completely, totally, absolutely flat bottom hole. But they've gone out of business, and I've been yet able to find one that'll make me a flat bottom hole. So I build it a little bit, take a skew as a scraper, clean it out, and I'm happy with it. That lets me live with it. Then I take this off of here, turn it around, and leave it on here until I get it ready to turn it around. So I'm trying to keep it as concentric as I can during this whole time. Turn it around, make it, and then I'll do my final finish on here. Now, when I got to be a little better, this was entirely made with this gouge. This is one of those bottom of the bowl gouges so that you can get in and make that final cut without worrying about hitting the side of the bowl because the bowl is fairly deep. And everything is shaped and finished with this negative rake scraper. I didn't discover those until last year, and it's a marvelous tool if you don't use them. It's the best thing in the world for smoothing something up, and it just simply, no matter what you do with it, it doesn't catch. So those are what I made these with. Okay, we've come to a breaking point. Anybody have any questions about what they've seen so far? And we're going to take this apart.
What you use for glue to put it on the block?
Well, since I'm going to wash it, this is incredible stuff. I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with something called resourcement. You remember that?
Yes,
red
I do.
stuff? Horrible.
Yes, you mix it up.
Horrible.
Powder.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's sold, made from old
Dead ducks, I think.
dead horses.
Anyway, the glue, as you say, with that one that's been here a long time, I've been amazed that it really does hold quite well.
Oh, that's the Type Bond 3?
Type Bond 3.
Yeah.
The Type Bond 2 is nicer. It dries a little bit better, but this is, it just simply, it's just amazing stuff. I really do like it. So
Let me add something about that Type Bond 3. I use it for all my woodwork, and I've also used the Type Bond 2. You have a short working window with the 3.
that's right.
Where it's going to start drying on you real quick. The 2 will give you more time, but the 3 is going to literally, in 5 minutes, you're not moving your pieces.
I'm going to glue one of these together in a minute. Maybe I can get you to come up and help me. Since you're familiar with it, you got to be quick. You
gotta
can't
be
do it
quick, yeah.
quickly. And it also tacks fairly quickly too. So in about 30 minutes or so, I can move on to the next ring and put it down. Don't want to try that out. Okay, so now let's talk about how I'm going to make one of these. First thing we got to do, let me tell you why I make a segmented bowl. I got to make some for Christmas, and I can make them. What's this? I'm going to watch this. I can make them in the next week or so, and actually put them in mail and give them to people for Christmas. Different than if I have this nice piece of walnut here that I got off of eBay and paid a lot of shipping for, and I make the bowl. What's going to happen to it between now and Christmas? It's going to move. And I'm going to have to either let it move or let it be a shape that can move and hope that it doesn't get unflat. I guess that's a word I can use. Yeah. Unflat between now and Christmas, or make it thick and turn it the second time. So I'm going to have a lot of time and money in this bowl. And this bowl you just saw here with this mahogany, Purple Heart, oak, and maple, I've got about $4.50. That's pretty cheap. And I've also got a lot of end grain to worry about. You see the end grain? No, it ain't there. It's end grain right there. That's only what you got, end grain, because you're using small pieces of wood. Consequently, there could be just lying around your shop like this. Here's enough to make several pieces out of right here. So that's part of the reason that I did it, is I have pieces like this from failed projects in the past that I have, and I can make these bowls, and I think they look relatively nice. People like them. They call me later on and say they're still using them and they like them. So let's make some segments. This thing, anybody know what this is? It's the most amazing thing in the world. This little device here sits on the floor, and this saw folds up and goes in it. I'll show you that in a minute. This is an amazing saw. It says for sale at Lowe's today for $99. And I defy you to find something you can use for $99 is pretty good. It's got a pretty coarse blade on it, but lo and behold, and Bob will tell you this, it'll cut segments. You can glue bowls out of them, and you have tight joints. It's pretty amazing. So I've made a little auxiliary table for it here, this piece of the particle board, and I'm going to use it along with this little stop. This little stop goes here, and on the back of your piece of stuff, you'll see that the next to the bottom line is oak. And what is the segment edge length of that? What does it say on there?
Segment edge length 1 and 5. Oak is 1 and 15, 30 seconds.
There it is, right there. You can look at it and tell it's 1 in 15, 30 seconds. So I put it on here. First of all, I'm going to line this thing up. This is the thing called the greenie. This is a specifically CNC machine. Of course, everything today is CNC machine, but it's really pretty accurate. So I can put it on here, and I can adjust this angle precisely. Now, how do I adjust this angle? The oldest way in the world. I take a shim, and I stuff the shim in the thing here, depending on how many shims I need to get it just right. Pretty interesting way to do it. Then I can turn it like this, and I can do it, get the saw vertical. Now, this is a hard demo to do, but look at this. Here's a piece of wood that I made a cross cut in. It looks to be pretty perfect cross cut, unless I reverse it. And then you can see there was a little bit of a mistake in it, just about half a degree. That makes a big difference in 12 segments. So the reason that you'll see on these boards, there's a line on top of them, is I'm going to line the line up when I glue them together. Because since I'm taking the board, we'll make one cut, turn it over, make another cut, turn it back, make another cut. This is what I'm doing. I'm able to make it so that it is self-canceling for any perpendicularity errors.
There you go.
So anyway, I'm not going to make a saw up here because I might cut something. But basically, this goes in here. I hold it with this little diggy-wicky, and I cut it. And the reason I'm not is, unlike most of you fine people, I'm only like this man. I'm left-handed. So I have the saw going this way if it was up to me, but this is Bob's saw. He likes it going this way. So, but it works really well. After you cut one, glue it together, and I cut one the first time out of a piece of, junk. Now, you guys pass this around, see how rough it is. Cut it out of a piece of junk so that I can see if the angles are right. And then I move my little shim until I get it right, tighten my screws up, and just saw segments up a storm. Okay? Any questions about the segment sawing?
Do you have to readjust that every time you make a different segment?
I don't make different segments.
Okay.
You have to adjust this length here. And what I do is I keep,
So your angle stays the same,
Yeah.
but your length.
and that piece of paper shows you on the back the
Okay,
length.
gotcha.
So I've only got this one with me. I don't have the other ones. But I basically keep these. And how I do that, I'm glad you asked a question. I forgot. Here be my gauges. This is the maple. So I put this, that's how wide the piece is going to be. And here is the angle with the segment edge lengths. I put this on the saw. You can tell I'm left-handed here. Put this on the saw, line it up. Then I get my oak one out, put it on the saw, line it up. Then I get my purple heart one out, and finally my mahogany one out. These are my actual templates that I keep in the future. But you can do the measurements. Just put your little caliper on there and do that, and it comes out pretty good. Okay. I want to show you this. It's pretty interesting. Now, besides this, if you happen to have a table saw, you can use this thing on the table saw with the grip there, and you cut the first one like this, and then you move it up here and cut the next one like that. This is called a wedgie sled, and that's what this guy sells these things for, because these are sold usually bigger out of polyethylene to line your wedgie shed up for, happens to be 12, 16, however many slices you want to make. So I'm not putting it in the trash. This is Bob's. But having a table saw set up to do it takes a lot of space. And that's why this is so small. When we're done, you'll see us fold it up and put it in that thing. It fits in the corner. It's just really quite impressive. Now, one thing I have to point out before you go out and buy one of these, you got to buy one with this little thing right here. And what that little screw does, hits that little boss there, and it keeps it from cutting this piece in two. If you didn't have this, this would cut the piece in two here, and you'd be out of luck. So it's set, and you obviously can only cut a segment maybe that long, but that's pretty big. So this one I was really surprised to find it on the saw this cheap. The big DeWalt's have it, but you got to have this little device to be able to keep from cutting your guide in two. Okay, to glue it together, I got the lines. I got to match the lines up. So Let's do this. I got a piece of blue tape here on the
Can you
tape.
do that from the other side because we can't see it on this
That's my
camera.
better, this is my better side. Well, not only am I left-handed, this is a little bit awkward, but we'll see if we can get this to work. Now, it's impossible for me to get them all lined up so they stick exactly on the tape and they don't overhang. So consequently, I got a hammer to beat on them with when I get ready to glue them up. So I believe that's 12. Nope, that's 11. Because when you put 11 or 13 in here, doesn't matter how hard you clamp it, it doesn't work. So I go in there and put me a little bit of glue. Glue is your friend here. You can't have too much because you're going to turn it all off anyway. Let it, make sure some is sunk to the bottom in each case. Okay? Now I'm going to take this piece over here and tear that off. Now I'm going to roll this sucker up just like this. So I get it where the tape is. Put the tape on it. Sorry about that. Put it over here on the bench. I'm going to take some little precision shims. You can tell these are precision. Basically so that I'm shimming up this clamp such that it's center line of the piece. And have to do it without a battery powered drill. Okay. Begin to squeeze out. I know a hammer. I have this nice piece of Delrin here that's pretty substantial. Voila. Now just give it a little more chicken soup. And it's pretty flat, pretty clean. If you put oil on your clamps before you start, you can use them again and again and again. So I think, does anybody want to touch this? It's a little sticky. But you can see it came out pretty good. The edges are pretty even and it's ready to dry and put on the machine. Now I'll sand this
How long do you have to leave it to dry?
tomorrow. I leave these overnight. I'll glue them together, but I leave the whole, this has been sitting for at least a day before I put it on the machine and turn it. I guess I better take that in too. So I made it in the 5 minutes for the tape. Kind of put them down, put it on with a brush, nice and neat, and do it. You end up right up against the time that the glue begins to kind of harden on you. But see, the clamp's pretty well centered all the way around it. The tape comes off later. That's not a problem. So these are actually much easier to do, the ones that are thinner. The bottom one is a hard one. When you get it, the bottom one done and you put it together and, Michael, what did you do? This happens. Sometimes you get it put together and you realize it ain't going to meet. So glue it in 2 pieces. Make yourself a little clamp out of 2 boards. Put your edges flush with these edges. Put it against the fence on your table saw. Basically what you're doing is you're going to plane those 2 off so they fit perfectly. Yeah, it ain't going to be perfect if you look at it with a critical eye like some of us would, but anybody that you give it to isn't going to have a clue that the 2 pieces aren't exactly symmetric. So there is a way to recover from making a boo-boo, not that we ever make a boo-boo.
Could you do that with a disc sander too?
What I do these with, if you look on the back of your piece of paper, the top it says Craftsy. And it's Jim, what's that guy's name up at the top?
Roger.
He's marvelous. My wife subscribes to this Craftsy bunch because they do needlework and painting and a lot of things like that. And they have pretty good woodworking stuff. And so she got some free and she says, do you want one of these? I subscribed to his and did it. And that's when I had met Bob. And that was the first guidance I had. And I highly suggest it as being an excellent thing. I basically copied the lower 4 sections of his urn there. He made that urn in 2 pieces and then glued it together so it was nice inside, nice on the outside, and it's really quite an impressive thing. So I put this through a belt sander thing where it goes through the sander and gets it sanded both sides. What he does, he'd take this and glue it to his block. He'd glue it to his block after he did a little disc sanding. He'd glue it to his block. Then he'd put it on his machine. He'd face it off a little bit. Do the next one, face it off a little bit. But the disc sander makes it pretty easy. This one came out pretty nice. There's very little change there when you get the hammer on it pretty hard. And because of this phenomena here and the original lubricity of the glue, it's trying to get in place. Okay?
On the piece that you clamped together, I think he was asking, you say you use a table saw to plane it off. If you sand that, will it give the same effect?
He does that. Does a
Oh,
very
on
good
that
job
side.
of it. Yeah, I try to just smush my finger up. So, okay. So now we're going to take our handy dandy. That's not the one. This is the one. Ready to go. We're going to stick this up on the machine and we're going to make one of these. So what I want to do is figure out how do I get that little piece of walnut in the middle of this. If you look at this carefully, the one you passed around, you'll see that no matter how careful you are, the little points don't actually come together in the middle. It's near impossible to do that. I guess if you had a CNC, you could do it. I can't do it. So if you look at his, you'll see that he made the bottom out of one piece. He said one piece is better because segments are going to crack over time and move, and that may be the case, but 2 years of my mold has convinced me it's a good way to go, and I think it looks a lot better. So now the question is, how do I get to the center of this not round object? I give anybody a free nut to figure that out. Okay, the answer comes from our friends at Crisler. And it's a 12-sided piece, right? It's a 3-jaw chuck. The 3-jaw chuck will center it if I did a good job of making these edges fairly precise, my pieces the same size, and by the fact that I'm putting so much pressure on it with this clamp, it tends to line the edges up near perfectly. So now I'm going to take my handy dandy little piece of maple, stick it up here, and I've never really gotten very good at this little mechanism here. I guess that's the way it goes. There we go. Okay? Give me a second. I have to get my little reverse chucking DD up here. And notice that doesn't go up against the shoulder. That was a boo-boo on my part. Okay, so I frequently will use this thing to help hold things flush against, so I can get a little bit of pressure on them and know that I'm up tight against these jaws. So now I'm going to ease that in a little bit, making sure that I'm kind of in the middle. There we go. Of these 3 places. If I had a 4-jaw chuck, I couldn't do this. Now, if I had a 16-side piece, I could do it with a 4-jaw chuck, but the 3-jaw chuck, you can't. So this little thing wasn't very expensive, and it's really helped me do a number of hocus-pocus operations like this one. For example, you guys remember the lighthouse I made. That's how I made the actual piece where the light went, was be able to hold it with that 3-jaw chuck. That's when I actually found the thing, was knowing how to do that. Now, while I'm over here, I know you're wondering about this, but I came home with all those nice salad bowls, and I could tell that it hurt my dog's feelings. So I made this doggy bowl for him. He had this bad habit of taking his bowl around the house when he was proud of his food and dumping it here and there. So we put it in this 10-pound piece of maple. It stays right where we put it. And one of the advantages to segmented turning is you can make big things like this because you don't have to have a great big piece of wood to make them out of. And you could even make them out of just PT lumber as far as that goes. Okay, so we got this ready to go. Let's take this sucker off. Let me get my drill here. I know that I got it here somewhere. Anybody see a drill over there?
Forstner?
What's that?
The Forstner bit?
No, this is a little hole. I guess maybe we won't drill it. Here it is. In case you guys don't know what this is you put a thread in here called a drawbar. This is the sucker that goes up in a milling machine to mount bits. And the bits have round things and just put them on one set screw. They're about $12 on eBay. They're not expensive, but it makes it really nice for something that you use occasionally. I don't have to take it out, chuck it up again, take it out, and chuck it up again. I can just do this thing with it. That was the same thing that I had this thing in, the same kind of thing, because I use that for every bowl. Okay, I've got clearance behind me there. Okay. I do good labor, just as long as you guys don't see me use a skew, everything will be fine. Okay, so now the opportunity is going to be, how do we get this little plug in there? And first of all, where do we get the little plug? We can buy a walnut dowel from a lot of people, or we can get one of these things called a plug maker, and we can make our own like this. And this nice dowel that's really beautiful, very dark color that I bought from Rockler is 0.504 inches. And I guess my bit's worn down a little bit, but I can't get it to go in, so I made some smaller dowels today that I can use to do this with. So this one's going to be okay right here. So what I do is I get me some handy dandy Q-tips, and I put a little glue in there to make a little lubrication. Put this in the thing. Go back to my little pusher. Get it up here. Y'all didn't just see that. And push this sucker home. Then when I get it almost home, I go back with a little more glue. Get everything covered as good as it pushes into the hole. And this is, like you said, something you got to do quick. Otherwise, it'll stop about halfway home and seize. So I got a pretty good glue joint there. I'm good and tight in here. So now, this comes next. And it's made fitted here. So to be nice about this and try to be a little neat, I'll stick it up here and I'll do me a little line on it. Of course, the glue is not going to mind the line. It's just going to go where it pleases. A little more of the, and I know that probably none of you do this, but I spread it with my finger.
Then you do this, right?
You guys will notice I wear this rag on my waist. That's what I wear it for, so I can wipe things on it. My wife is so ashamed of me when I go out in public with it on.
You're supposed to do it on your shirt.
I do that.
She likes it.
Now, you want to line this up so that these angles and those angles don't match. So you want to make it, or some people make them so it tends to twist as it goes up. That's how you do this. My little handy dandy glue protector thing. Clamp it down, and this is what I refer to in my little document there as the $1,000 bar clamp. I got that sucker clamped up good there. Wipe my glue off. Wait 30 minutes, which we're not going to have to do, and then go back and do these. I change it to another one of these shop-made.
Oh, so you've got a different one for each as you.
And the reason why is if I use the nice one that we all have, the little aluminum one, it sticks in far enough to hit this through that. So you want to have them as deep as you can. You'll notice when this one comes out, this hole in here will be almost round from the pressure. This is a good old hard piece of white oak, and it really lines up well because you're making them concentric. The more concentric you make it, the less of this you have to turn off, and that's a better thing. So you end up, as you turn the bowl, wherever we did that bowl, here we go. So you end up with less to turn off each time. And how I finally did the bowl, the last tool thing I want to show you, which I just think is the neatest thing in the world, is this device, the Tompkins T-gauge. I saw this on YouTube. Basically, it's a 16th of an inch every time one of those little colored balls is. And so as you're sliding it in to your thing while it's turning, you can very carefully watch what the sidewall is doing. Note, well, I got it about probably a 30-second high right there. And I'm perfect down to the bottom. The big long scissor things, yeah, I can make one reading and mark it with a pencil, but this lets me in real time get into the bowl and see what the bowl is doing, so I can go back and turn a little bit there and turn a little bit in the next place. Does anybody have a question that I can try to answer?
What's that blue thing called again?
I'm sorry?
What is that blue thing you just showed called?
Tompkins T-gauge. Craft Supplies has it. That's where I found it. And I've seen this guy on the web use it, and I'm just like, why don't I have one of those? That's just what I need, because that great big thing is just, it's still hanging on my wall.
Well, the balls slide nice and easy up and down the wood too, so it's
Well,
better than the big.
yes, sir, I think they do. You're certainly welcome to give it a try.
Now, are you
Take
using
him,
that,
take him and just see if his earlobes the same.
are you using that while it's running?
I can. I don't normally do it, but you certainly can. So this will dry for a while. I'll put the other two on there. I'll finish this one tomorrow and finish it again inside. And I have Christmas presents. So thank you guys for listening and helping me figure out what this wood is up here. And by the way, when you get to the show and tell back there, my dog bowl